All right, so here we are with Tessa, Maggie, and Brenna Yovanov, and three absolutely amazing authors. And here I am sitting right next to them, and this is pretty incredible. Here we are at SIA Book Fest, and we get to interview all together. This is very, very exciting.
We're very excited.
So first of all, I thought at first that I was going to have all of you separately, but then I heard that we were doing all of our interview together. And so I read several of your individual books, but when I heard last week that we were doing one interview instead of three, I thought, well, I better go check out the Curiosities. And I picked it up, and it's absolutely amazing, because it is not just wonderful stories by all three of you, but it's also you all interacting and talking about stories and talking about writing, and so I had to get the anatomy of curiosity as well. Why don't you all comment just a minute about that book and kind of how it came about?
It actually began way back when we were critique partners, so we read each other's work and edit it before it goes out to our actual editors. And before I was a full-time author, I was a full-time portrait artist, and I was part of a movement called A Painting a Day. And every single day we would try and create a painting from beginning to end. And I learned so much by doing tiny little pieces from start to finish over and over again. There's 400 pieces out there in the world. And I said when I met them, we should do this for our stories. We should have a website where we write a story. Couldn't do it every single day, it wouldn't work, but we did one every single week for the first year.
It still turns out that that is a lot.
That's love stories.
What did you say yesterday? 72 stories for each of us?
It's between, I can't remember, it's 72 or 75. I've counted a few times, and I always land between 72 and 75.
More than 70, but less than 80. That's
right.
Dozens of
Yes.
stories.
Right.
In just 3 years.
Wow.
So.
And so we learned so much from our writing doing that, and also the creation of ideas, and also most importantly about the way that we all write, because it becomes really obvious when you're given a common prompt, and we take it in very predictable ways all the time. And so the first Curiosities was the best of those stories, with us commenting on how they were the way they were.
I absolutely loved that interaction between the three of you. The fact that it sort of defined each of your approach to different ideas, different topics. And each of you have your own huge strengths in writing, or your own sort of your thing that you focus on. And that was just really, really fantastic. But it also illustrated a lot of the community aspect of writing, which I think is really amazing. And that's something that has been a huge eye-opener for me during this book festival, is that as I've been talking with a lot of authors, and I got to meet Courtney Stevens at the very beginning, back at the early planning stages, and just to realize that, you know, a lot of us non-authors envision people sitting down at a desk and writing a book solo.
Garrett,
Yeah.
bourbon,
Right.
smoking,
Right.
dying young.
The artist death there. But yeah, it becomes, it's to see how much community matters to writing, how much community matters to producing books like this. I think is huge. Would you like to comment at all about that?
Yes, Brenna, would you like to comment on that? Oh.
Even Hemingway had friends.
You don't get a lot of the actuality of what it's like to be a professional author before you are a professional author. There's no accurate description of it in other books, or in certainly not movies. And no one will, it's rare for someone to actually honestly say, yes, you're an aspiring writer. Let me tell you all of the complicated layers of how this business actually works. And so once you're starting to learn the different pitfalls, you're already in it. And I don't think that many people would make it without reaching out to other authors and just saying, how did you do this? Have you seen this before? How do I get out of this giant pit?
How do you like getting paid only twice a year?
And so it really is a necessity, I think, to have a support network of other writers who understand that it's possible to be really excited about your book coming out, but also really upset about some things.
Also, creatively writing novels, any kind of stories, is storytelling, and so the final piece is always the audience. And when you're friends with other writers, you have a chance to have those sounding boards without the kind of purely emotional resonance that comes from a reader, as people who also are interested in craft.
Right.
And so that kind of filter before you get to go out, that testing, screening ground, is valuable.
Yeah, a lot of us readers, we like to scream and go, oh, that was amazing. But it would be nice to have a set of eyes that actually knows what to look for.
Well, and also, the internet has really made that community possible in a way that it wasn't even a decade ago. You know, we don't even live in the same states as each other. We knew each other online for about a year before we ever met each other in person.
Brenna actually comes from a different planet from either of us, so it's really a miracle of science.
Yeah. Well, since you all know each other so well, would you all mind, instead of me telling you a little bit about each of your books and your writing, maybe you all could introduce each other. So, Tessa, would you mind introducing Maggie?
This is Maggie Stiefvater, and she writes books the way that she lives life, and they're all very exciting adventures with complicated relationships and magic and race cars and violence.
I like it. Well done. Tell me
Right
more
off the
about my
cuff.
eyes.
Perfect. Now, Maggie, would you mind introducing her?
So Brenna does come from another planet, and so do her books. And the thing that I love most about her books is that they have the kind of removed observation of humanity that can only come from being on the outside.
Very anthropological.
Also, she bakes anatomical hearts.
I do.
I heard a story about that.
It was messy. I put it in the refrigerator very late at night because that's usually the time I have all my worst ideas. And I forgot it was there in the morning and I scared myself so bad.
Opening the fridge and finding
It was
it.
just there.
I do have to say that Brenna has a book coming out this year, and I like all of Brenna's books, but this book, Places No One Knows, is my absolute favorite of hers, and it's also the most Brenna story of hers. So anyone who actually wants to know who Brenna is, which is a very complicated thing, if you read this novel, this will be the closest you will possibly get from all of
Oh, this makes me happy because it is a very Brenna book, so it's also my favorite thing.
It's the very first book that Brenna told me about, the very first
Oh, wow.
time we met in person.
In an Applebee's.
In an Applebee's. And I'm so
Dark
excited
time.
that this book is finally out too, because I've been excited about it since the summer
I
of
was
2009 or something.
So when is it released?
May 17th of this year, so
May
just
17th.
a couple
Places no one knows.
Places no one knows. I need to introduce Tess loves dragons and Odin and Norse mythology and the absolute maddeningness of politics, and writes big, sprawling, world-filled, epic books about trolls and identity and violence and politics. And what if we had gods in politics? How would that get things done faster? And how would that hinder everything?
Get in the way of it all. Well, now that you all have been introduced, we have time, I think, for me to ask each of you the one question I've been wanting to ask you the most. And I have maybe a list of 100 questions for each of you. But
You just distilled it to one. I am really excited to find out what the one question is.
It's going to be intense. It's going to be like plutonium.
yeah, it's very dense.
Now, is it like an essay answer, or do we do bubble?
It's up to you.
Okay.
It's up to you.
Okay.
Maybe it depends on the question. For each of you, it's different. So, since you're in this order on the couch, I guess I'll go ahead and start with Tessa. My question for you about your Asgard novels, and we got to chat about them a little bit yesterday. I was so glad about that. I've told you this already, but your Norse mythology rings so true, and it is so obvious that you know it in and out better than anyone I've definitely ever met. And I've talked Norse mythology with several people, and I loved it as a child and read a lot of it. But you know it truly. And how was the process of taking all of that knowledge and creating this world, which is so very detailed? I was just in awe at the detail of the world and the idea of how much research went into that. Just
Thank
made me
you.
sit down.
I started reading Norse mythology only about 10 years ago. So I really was never into it as a child. And when I was starting to read it, I was very aware of what I wanted out of it, because I went looking for warrior culture and the ways that religion intersects with warrior culture, because I was thinking about Anglo-Saxon literature in particular, where I started. And also it was 2004, 2005, and America was so obviously becoming more overtly a warrior culture with the rhetoric in politics and things like that. So when I started, I was looking for specific patterns in the mythology itself. And I looked at the big sprawling epics and some of the poetry, and then I went back as far as I could into archaeological information, and I looked to see how archaeologists and anthropologists think that the myths developed from the really core, very ambiguous, we only have words and symbols and pictures and grave sites, and how they may have developed into the very complicated stories that were written down only about 1,000 years ago. And I tried to map out my own understanding of the patterns, and so what the core values of the mythology really were, so that every time I was writing about one of the gods or taking something and grafting it onto American values, I was doing that in the oldest, most genuine way I could. And I'm really happy to hear that you think I know it very well, because I will actually confess I changed almost everything a little bit. Mm-hmm. So almost nothing in my books is actually accurate to the stories of Norse mythology. So I feel very glad to know that I completely tricked you into thinking that you can learn all you need to know about Norse mythology from my books.
Well, to be fair, I did notice some changes, but
some of them are very big.
But they all felt very intentional. It's sort of like the difference between
a
student who has, fragmented sentences everywhere and a talented writer who uses a fragment powerfully.
I think it's very important when you're using other cultures and other magics that you know it as well as you can, especially the core value, not just the superficial stories. If you're going to take it and put it on your own culture, it's your responsibility to do everything you can to get the value right.
Absolutely. Well, it very much rang true. All right, now Maggie?
No, I'm really nervous now because that was like a 60-point question. It was definitely an essay question, not a bubble question.
Do you want a bubble question or an essay question?
No, I'll take the burning question. I want to know the
burning question. Well, actually, I have a question and a half for you.
This could be
Sorry. Devolving.
Sorry. Yes. So the first question I had for you was, as I've been reading your books, especially The Raven Cycle, and I've already talked with you about this as well, the character dynamics are amazing, jaw-dropping amazing. To have that many characters who are so well developed and so distinct and so impressive in their development, and then to have all of them interacting and all of those interactions to be so well honed and so perfect, that's something that I don't know how you accomplished that. And then as I begin to follow you and find out more about you, you're brilliant at art, and you're a musician, and you like cool cars, and so you're cooler than me in every possible way. And so my biggest, most burning question is, what are you not good at? Because my goodness. Is that fair? That wasn't fair.
There you go. Giving away all my secrets. I'm not really good at being more than a decorative human. I'm really more to look at than to live life. Well, the thing is that when I was a kid, I decided that I didn't want to live an ordinary life. And I was just talking with Courtney Stevens about this at 2 o'clock in the morning, the first night of the festival. And I realized that wasn't even about not wanting to live an ordinary life. It was about wanting to live an extraordinary life that left pieces behind. And I know that that's especially hilarious because I arrived with a piece of my Nissan at the conference today, but that wasn't the kind of pieces I meant leaving behind. I meant my mark on the world. And so all of my stories are about what makes a hero and what makes someone larger than life, and how you can just make your life that large. So I don't, in my life in Stevewater Land, I'm not larger than life. Everyone in my life is a huge personality. And so what do you do about surrounding yourself with people like that? So all of my choices are always that. And things that I'm not good at, I will never tell you because I wait until I'm good with them, and then I post them on the internet. That's the important thing, is patience.
Right, right.
Yes.
Well, very good. My second question is, are you going to say pansy?
I'm killing you.
Okay.
She never breaks her promises.
I do what I say. Did you? Tiny violence.
Give the reader what they
Okay,
need,
but I
not
do
what
have
they
to
want.
say, I've been working on this series for 15 years. I started writing when I was 19, and I was a terrible writer back then. I put it down. It had so many characters. They were all the same person. They were all just different parts of me, fragmented onto the page. And so it took 10 years before I wrote all of the other books to figure out how to actually make them into real humans by stealing them from other people in my life. And it's really strange now to be facing down an end that I have seen coming for a decade and a half. My husband said, "Hey, I found out this cool thing about ley lines," and I was like, "I don't need it anymore." So it was really bizarre.
Yeah. Well, I love the writing cycle. Absolutely wonderful. All right, are you ready?
No, the answer is no.
All right. So the question I have for you, Brenna, your books have, as Maggie already mentioned, they have this otherworldly quality to them. They really do, and yet at the same time, they tend to have very grounded and human kind of environments, like the high school environment and Big Valentine, etc. So, how do you sort of blend the two and to create that sort of uncanny effect that you have? It's very it gets under your skin, the way the two sort of mesh together.
In my daily life, I am a very abstract kind of person. And so I feel like a lot of times I have to come up with a really solid, kind of mundane setting in order to explore all of the really fiddly, spiraling, weird stuff that I'm very interested in, because otherwise it would just be me putting half a thought on the page and it wouldn't invite other people to come in and think about it with me. It would only be my thought process on the page, and they have seen my first drafts, and that's what they are. And so then I always have to kind of look around and see what would be the door that lets other people come into what I find interesting. And what I've found over and over again is that the most efficient way to do that is to start with the familiar and then kind of gradually mess it up, make it unfamiliar.
Yeah. I love that metaphor of the door. It's definitely that. I think I walked into Paper Valentine, which was the first one I read of yours, and everything seemed kind of normal until all of a sudden it wasn't anymore. And you had this sort of slightly abusive best friend ghost hanging around you all the time and messing with you. Oh, it was very uncomfortable.
Well, one of the things that is the most rewarding about working with him is that we all think about story in such a massively different way. When Brenna looked at us and said, "Well, have you seen our first drafts?" That's because when she writes her first drafts, if she can't think of a word, she puts commas in. She thinks of her sentences down to the word. And so it'll be, he walked into the room and he comma, walks through the door. And I'm like, "Brenna, what's happening there?" She's like, "Well, I know it's going to be an adverb one day." I'm like, and so it's a really heightened example of how she thinks of language and story in a totally different way. And
Wow.
I mean, it's been really interesting. And you learn from it too.
Now
It's
Maggie's
affected
doing
me.
it.
Yeah.
If I don't know what adverb goes in the story, I'll put 3 of them there. Like it's one of these 3 or a one I haven't thought of yet. And so my first draft will have all 3 of them there. It's like the exact opposite of how I remember. No, this isn't right. The rhythm of this is wrong.
Wow. Well, it's been so wonderful talking with you all and interviewing with you all. We are out of time, but thank you so much. It is awesome to have you at this book festival. It's awesome to get to meet you all, and I'm definitely... I don't have a word anymore. Comma. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.